The next question is for Governor DeSantis.
We can get 3 things done. If we want to get things done, here's how we get it done in Washington. We must find a way.
Can we please respect the time?
What the was that? So last night was the second GOP debate, and it was a total mess. I watched it so you don't have to, so let's get straight to it. Here are my highlights and lowlights from the car crash that was the second debate. First lowlight has to be the way this debate was run. It was basically just this for 2 hours.
Loud noises!
First off, Fox Business decided there was a spot for one British moderator and they didn't pick me. Bullshit. They instead chose Stuart Varney, who immediately f***ed up the Univision woman's name.
I'm Stuart Varney of Fox Business, and I am thrilled to be sitting alongside my co-moderators, Fox News Channel Dana Perino and Ilya Calderon, Univision.
I mean, how hard is it to say Ilya Calderon? And most of the debate was a waste of time because the moderators allow candidates to shout over each other, didn't give them time to respond when they were called out, and asked ridiculous questions that destroyed any flow or continuity.
Do your homework, Tim, because Obama bought those curtains.
Did you send them back?
It's in the press.
Did you send them back?
It's the State Department.
Did you send them back?
Did you send them back? You're the one that works in Congress.
Oh my gosh.
You get it
You
done.
hung them on your curtains.
They were there before I even showed up at the residence. You are scrapping. You are scrapping.
I'm not
scrapping. You know I fought taxes.
Here's the fact, though.
I cut taxes. I loaded up our
You wanted a gas tax increase, and then you wanted
Ladies and gentlemen, we do not intend to go ahead like this. In fact, we're about to take a commercial break.
And honestly, Univision's Calderon deserves her own lowlight. First off, because this is what we do to pander to Hispanic voters, apparently, all debates must now include a round of Spanish while everyone else just sits there smiling and pretending it's okay.
Please allow me to welcome our Spanish-speaking audience. Muy buenas noches a todos. Desde la Biblioteca Presidencial Ronald Reagan, los precandidatos republicanos también buscan su voto para las primarias del partido. Bienvenidos.
And good evening.
And then she launched straight into a round of questions that were right out of the Democratic Party propaganda book. There's this question to Ron DeSantis, which is quite literally a Kamala Harris talking point.
Florida's new Black History curriculum says, quote, slaves develop skills which in some instances could be applied for their personal benefit. You have said slaves develop skills in spite of slavery, not because of it. But many are still hurt. For descendants of slaves, this is personal. What is your message to them?
And in fairness to DeSantis, he refused to take the bait.
So first of all, that's a hoax that was perpetrated by Kamala Harris. We are not going to be doing that. Second of all, that was written by descendants of slaves. These are great Black history scholars, so we need to stop playing these games.
Then there's the honestly ridiculous claim that gun violence is a uniquely American problem from a Colombian citizen.
Governor Burgum, for the first time ever, a Univision poll found that mass shootings and gun safety are one of the most important issues for Latino voters. Mental health concerns are not unique to the United States, but gun violence is.
Next, she's going to be telling us that the United States has a coke problem. And then Calderon tried to force Mike Pence to accept her premise about LGBTQ people.
The Department of Homeland Security warns that violence against LGBTQ plus people is on the rise and intensifying. According to a recent study, members of that community are 9 times more likely to be victims of violent hate crimes. As president, how would you protect this community from violent attacks and discrimination?
Why was she asking Mike Pence? Well, because he's the Christian one, and Democrats all know that Christians are apparently massive homophobic bigots or something. I would love it if other groups that are statistically way more likely to be attacked were ever spoken about this way, like Jews maybe. But I'm not going to hold my breath. I don't think there's enough votes up for grabs. Now, I do think it's fine that other moderators are asked to host debates, but not when they hijack the event to push Democratic Party propaganda. You think MSNBC is falling over themselves to invite Mark Levin or Sean Hannity or Tucker Carlson to moderate one of their debates? No, because the DNC isn't dumb. But the reason Ilya Calderon was included was because it's quite clear that the Republican Party is all in on identity politics, even though we're supposed to think it's dumb and pointless and racist, which it is. And that's the next lowlight of the evening.
There's no doubt that if you lead by example, it's the best way to get the job done. If you look at my office in the Senate, my chief of staff is the only Hispanic female chief of staff in the Senate. I hired her because she was the best, highest qualified person we have.
The United States is not a racist country. It's actually the least racist country in the world if you look past the propaganda. But obviously talking about race keeps racism alive. Why are we talking about people as white Americans, black Americans, Hispanic Americans, Asian Americans? Why aren't we just talking about Americans? If Republicans keep talking as if issues that matter to everyone matter more to people because of their skin color, they're doing the left's work for them and keeping racism alive. Next lowlight, most debates end with a closing statement or something from each candidate, and instead Fox Business went with this train wreck of a Survivor ripoff.
It's now obvious that if you all stay in the race, former President Donald Trump wins the nomination. None of you have indicated that you're dropping out. So, which one of you on stage tonight should be voted off the island? Please use your marker to write your choice on the notepad in front of you. 15 seconds starting now. Of the people on the stage, who should be? I'm absolutely serious.
With all due respect, I mean, we're here, like, you know, we're happy to debate, but I think that that's disrespectful to my fellow competitors.
Nobody wants to participate.
Let's do some questions. Let's talk about the future of the country.
What was that? Again, good on DeSantis for leading the charge against the bullshit, but this kind of question is beneath Dana Perino, I'm sure she'd agree, beneath the candidates on stage, and most importantly, far beneath what Republican voters deserve from an event like this. And the last lowlight of the evening for me was the total cringe of it all. You had Chris Christie leaning into the camera with his pre-rehearsed attack on Donald Trump being Donald Duck because he likes to duck.
And Donald Trump should be here to answer for that, but he's not. And I want to look at that camera right now and tell you, Donald, I know you're watching. You can't help yourself. I know you're watching, okay? And you're not here tonight, not because of polls and not because of your indictments. You're not here tonight because you're afraid of being on the stage and defending your record. You're ducking these things. And let me tell you what's going to happen. You keep doing that, no one up here is going to call you Donald Trump anymore. We're going to call you Donald Duck.
I know a few other things Donald Trump likes to do that rhyme with duck that might give you a catchier nickname, let alone the question, if Trump is Donald Duck, what does that make Chris Christie? Then there's Mike Pence, who not only looked like shit, but decided that the debate was a perfect place to try out his comedy routine, and it went exactly as you'd expect.
Joe Biden doesn't belong on a picket line, he belongs on the unemployment line. I'm glad Vivek pulled out of his business deal in 2018 in China. That must have been about the time you decided to start voting in presidential elections. I served in Congress for 12 years, although it seemed longer. Chris, you mentioned the president's situation. My wife isn't a member of the teachers union, but I got to admit I've been sleeping with a teacher for 38 years. And full disclosure.
Here's the thing, Mike Pence is a serious guy, and that's fine. His whole brand is a serious Christian whose faith is real, unlike most politicians. So I don't know why he tried to be something he's not, especially if it meant getting the entire country to picture him naked in bed. And on that note, time for the highlights. First highlight of the debate is Dana Perino. The other moderators were terrible, but Dana actually tried to control the chaos and held candidates' feet to the fire when they refused to answer questions, which they did a lot. Here's one great example. She asked Mike Pence about Obamacare, and he did what all the candidates did, which is try to talk about something else. She actually forced him to stay on topic, and it didn't go well for him.
You said if elected, you would repeal all Obamacare mandates. However, you also made that same promise in 2016. And at that time, Trump-Pence had congressional majorities for at least the first 2 years, and you did not deliver on that promise. So Obamacare, right now, it is more popular than ever. Why should Americans trust you, if you become president, to fix that, or is Obamacare here to stay?
Well, first, let me speak to the mass shootings issue, and then I'll answer that question. It's an important one, Dana. Look, I'm someone that believes that justice delayed is justice denied. And as a father of three, as the grandfather of three beautiful little girls, I am sick and tired of these mass shootings happening in the United States of America. And if I'm president of the United States, I'm going to go to the Congress of the United States, and we're going to pass a federal expedited death penalty for anyone involved in a mass shooting so that they will meet their fate in months, not years. It is unconscionable that the Parkland shooter, Ron, is actually going to spend the rest of his life behind bars in Florida. That's not justice. We have to mete out justice and send a message to these would-be killers that you are not going to live out your days behind bars. You're going to meet justice in this system.
But does that mean Obamacare is here to stay?
Well, thank you for reiterating the question, because I'd love to answer it. Look, I think it's one of the choices here. You know, my former running mate, Donald Trump, actually has a plan to start to consolidate more power in Washington, D.C., consolidate more power in the executive branch. If I'm president of the United States, it's my intention to make the federal government smaller by returning to the states those resources and programs that are rightfully theirs under the 10th Amendment of the Constitution. That means all Obamacare funding, all housing funding, all HHS funding, all of it goes back to the states. We'll shut down the Federal Department of Education. Will allow states to innovate. We're going to revive federalism in America, and states are going to help bring America back.
But Stu, go ahead.
Next highlight is a quick one. The quality of the hair on stage. First off, Vivek Ramaswamy showed up like Jimmy Neutron, but we have to take a second to appreciate the hair and eyebrow game on Doug Burgum. I know I'm scraping the barrel with highlights. Give me a break. It was a terrible night. Next, we have Nikki versus Vivek round 2, who literally went Billy Madison on him.
There's one person on this.
This is infuriating because TikTok is one of the most dangerous social media apps that we could have. And what you've got, I honestly, every time I hear you, I feel a little bit dumber for what you say. Because I can't believe that here you've got a TikTok situation. What they're doing is these 150 million people are on TikTok. That means they can get your contacts, they can get your financial information, they can get your emails, they can get text messages, they can get all of these things.
This is very important for our party.
Exactly what they're doing.
This is very important for our party, and I'm going to say
you've gone and you've helped China make medicines in China, not America. You're now wanting kids to go and get on the social media that's dangerous for all of us. You went and you were in business with the Chinese that gave Hunter Biden $5 million. We can't trust you. We can't trust you. We can't have TikTok in our kids' lives. We need to ban it.
Mr. Ramaswamy, you have 15 seconds.
I think, excuse me.
You have 15 seconds, Mr. Ramaswamy.
Thank you. I think we would be better served as a Republican Party if we're not sitting here hurling personal insults and actually have a legitimate debate about policy.
Not because I think this is particularly helpful, but because it's just so much fun to see how much she obviously hates him. It's also hilarious to see Vivek going from hurling personal insults last time to crying about personal insults the moment they're hurled at him. Another highlight, if you actually care about the whole point of the debate, which is to pick a nominee, is that the candidates actually mentioned Trump this time. We already know Chris Christie called him out with his cringe Donald Duck routine, but DeSantis called him out too.
I want to ask you about something that I think is on a lot of Republicans' minds. This election could come down to less than 50,000 votes in 3 states. Abortion was on the ballot in 6 states in 2022. Republicans lost all of them. Next year, abortion will likely be on the ballot in Arizona. That is a must-win state. Governor DeSantis, how are you going to win over independent, pro-choice voters in Arizona?
Same way we did in Florida. We won the greatest Republican victory in a governor's race in the history of the state, over 1.5 million votes. We were winning places like Miami-Dade County, Palm Beach, that nobody thought was possible because we were leading with purpose and conviction. I reject this idea that pro-lifers are to blame for midterm defeats. I think there's other reasons for that. The former president, he's missing in action tonight. He's had a lot to say about that. He should be here explaining his comments to try to say that pro-life protections are somehow a terrible thing. I want him to look into the eyes and tell people who've been fighting this fight for a long time. My wife and I earlier today were at the gravesite of President and Mrs. Reagan, and I noticed that there was a quote where it says, every single person has purpose and worth. We're better off when everybody counts. And I think we should stand for what we believe in. I think we should hold the Democrats accountable for their extremism, supporting abortion all the way up until the moment of birth. That is infanticide, and that is wrong.
And so did Vivek Ramaswamy, in a way. And by in a way, I mean by doing so from inside Trump's ass.
I will respect Donald Trump and his legacy because it's the right thing to do. But we will unite this country to take the America First agenda to the next level, and that will take a different generation to do it.
That does it. I repeat, that.
Of course, they're all pulling their punches because they're also trying to woo the MAGA base at the same time, and that's part of the problem here, but it's telling that they're actually daring to mention Trump. There are a few things that could have been the last highlight. DeSantis leading the charge against insane questions or the stupid Survivor stuff could have got a mention, but we've already talked about it. So my last highlight is going to be that the downsides of other candidates were actually raised and highlighted. Sure, they were raised in the worst way possible, but we're now actually getting a sense of the differences between them. We're getting an idea of who has actually done stuff versus who's really good at just talking about stuff. We got an idea of who actually has answers to questions versus who has answers to different questions. We got an idea of their reliance on identity politics, which flies in the face of our supposedly anti-identity politics position. We got another insight into the fact that Vivek Ramaswamy is running a campaign built on the assumption that you will never ever Google him, like the fact that he's anti-social media for young people but also kissed up to Jake Paul on TikTok, or that he's anti-China after making a ton of money in China. But there's a problem here. Anytime we got near actually uncovering a key difference between candidates and allowing them to debate, the moderators let this happen.
The next question is for Governor DeSantis.
We want to get things done. Here's how we get it done in Washington. We must find a way.
Can we please respect the time?
So lots of lowlights, a few highlights, but overall, we lost. The Democratic Party won, and Donald Trump continues to consolidate support without having to even get in the mud. Here's the brutal truth. None of this even matters unless these candidates can explain why they deserve your support over Trump. They can make these little pot shots at him if they want, but Trump won't care, and he shouldn't care. The primaries are his to lose, and unless the rest of the field does something drastic, nothing's going to change that. And for the few of them who are actually running for president, instead of Trump's VP or cabinet member or cupbearer, that's the problem they need to solve, and that's the problem they're not solving.